it's an interesting mix for me because on one hand I think, you know, our culture is headed for destruction, and I'm living my life to try to prevent that and to try and move us in a direction that avoids that destruction. And some days I have more hope than others that we can avoid it. But in other ways, when people come who are like, you know, are you preparing for the end times, and what happens when peak oil happens, and you know, the sort of survivalist mentality, or even just like the expectation, like I just don't think that like I see that destruction or that going downhill or that headed for significant change, but I don't see it as an overnight change. I think it's not impossible that can happen, but I don't expect that, like culture, like, you know, Rome didn't fall in a day. You know, it's like it takes it's cycles and it's many iterations that take it so that it's less, you know, and less, or that it shifts in these different ways. And so I see that change is coming, but I don't expect to wake up one morning and the rest of the world's just not there, you know, or like that we can no longer, like there's no more food, there's no more fuel. Like, I mean, it's not impossible, but that's not the thing that I fear or that I expect. And so I don't plan for that. I plan for gradual degradation and how to either, you know, avoid that or to do that in a gentle way, because like change is inevitable, and what's hard for people is when change happens too fast. And so I think if we can choose to change our lives, and also people don't like it when change is forced upon them. So it's like when the change is too fast and forced upon them, that's really hard for people. And so if we can voluntarily make the changes, and if we can help it to happen at a gradual rate, then, you know, we can be headed towards a sustainable life rather than, you know, sort of being forced to make more rapid changes and to feel like it was outside of our control. And so like that to me is like the hope that I see and the direction that I hope that we can move in. So it's weird because when someone asks, like, do you think the world is going in this really bad direction? I'm like, yes, but I don't actually I don't expect the doomsday scenarios. I expect the doom century scenario, you know, and so it's, but there are all factors out there. Like, it's not that I disagree with the notion of peak oil, it's just, I think peak oil doesn't mean, you know, one day the gas isn't there. It means you're starting to see the shifts and the change. And so, you know, I want us to avoid the crash landing. You know, if we can have a soft landing, that would be great. And one piece of it for me is like, I mean, you know, people in the United States are like, I mean, we're a wealthy country. We're not going to be the ones to crash and burn, or we're not going to be the first. I mean, maybe the poor people in this country will feel it worse than the rich people, but even still, like, by most standards in the world, even our poor are rich. And so, like, at some level, ecological living for me is social justice. It's not just about, it's about the inherent rights of other species and the ecosystems to exist in a positive way, but it's also about that when the shit comes down, it's going to come down on the poorest people first. And so by living more sustainably, if we can really make that cultural shift to more sustainable living, that is, to me, all about saving the poor people of the world from misery, saving the poor people of this country from more misery, as well as, you know, hopefully avoiding, you know, the, you know, permanent destruction of ecosystems and species and things like that. And so, you know, because at some level, if we destroy ourselves, if human culture collapses or whatever, like, life on this planet will continue. It will continue differently, but I don't think we'd have to try really hard to completely destroy the life force on this planet. And so, I'm not worried about us destroying the Earth as much as, and I'm not even worried about us destroying ourselves. It's more about the misery that I'd like to see avoided. And so, like, if all Dancing Rabbit did was just the 50 or even 500 of us living more ecologically, like, that'd be a drop in the bucket in the sense of, there would be that many more resources for other people to partake in. But if we can really change our culture and change, the culture of the nation that is using 25% of, some of the major resources in the world, then that would make those resources available to the rest of the world in a much more fair way. And so, I think that the United States has its standard of living and its lifestyle, on the backs of, the poor people in the world, and on resource extraction from, the whole world and not just from within our borders. So if we can change the culture that's in some ways at the center of the unsustainability, then we can hopefully change the world to a place where people all over the world can either raise their standard of living, or at least not be forced out of their more sustainable indigenous cultures and forced to raise their standard of living into a more mechanized, modern, industrialized world. And so I think, it's all interconnected, and so it's like, in some ways it's hard to see how what we're doing here is really going to affect people in Africa, and it's not as a direct effect as if I was going over there and handing out malaria, things, or working to build them, better housing. But there is some level where it's all connected, that if we can change the culture of the United States to being more sustainable, my goal or my hope would be that would allow other people to live lives that were richer and more fulfilling, and less oppression, more access to the resources that they need to live happy lives, happy and sustainable lives. Because it's not about just carving up the unsustainable pie and spreading it out more evenly. It's about us all having sustainable lives. And to me, that's going to mean a shift in the balance of how resources are used.